Welcome to Focus on the Candidates. My friend, oh boy, when you're tired, it's rough. My friend Steve Behar is going to chat with me a little bit about the mayor's race in New York City, which has developed into quite a race, or should I say, quite the spectacle.
It's definitely a spectacle.
So,
It's a strange election. It really is.
so Steve, what's your impression?
Um, I think on January 1st, Zoran Mandami is going to be the mayor,
Okay.
and I think he's going to win pretty handily. Um, it's there was a question for a time whether or not the opposition um, could consolidate and 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 support one person. And the problem is that Sliwa or Cuomo or Adams, none of them are consolidating. They're all out there.
Right, right. Has there been any effort? Well, I know there is in the press, but amongst the candidates, is it like any effort by the candidates to get into the forefront?
Well, I think well, the interesting part was, and you know this, when I spoke to you a month before the primary, I said Cuomo's going to win this,
Yep.
and he was going to go away winning it easy. And um, I think he thought that too. And he did very little campaigning. He
Mm-hmm.
had very, very little, if no operation, um, no field game, nothing. And I think him and his campaign may have taken it for granted that they had this one. And on the other side of the coin, um, Mendami had a huge um, field operation and a huge ground game. And you could see as the weeks, after like that last month, you could see each week Mendami just gaining traction, gaining traction. And by the time we got to 2, 3 weeks out, I'm like, this guy could win it. And in that last week really showed me he was going to win. So you saw that campaign really happen. It was going on for a long time, and I'm sure that they were setting the foundation, but they really won it in that last 4 weeks.
Okay. You would have thought that Cuomo would have learned anything from Joe Crowley because it's similar. I mean, Joe Crowley, he actually he lived out of the district, and AOC was, pretty vigilant in her campaign. I see similarities between the two of them. Would you agree?
I think there's something to that. I had I know Joe Crowley for a long time. I like Joe. I think Joe's a good guy. In fact, him and I have the same birthday. But that being said, it's he I think got, I won't say suckered into it, but he fell into this Washington DC inside the Beltway mentality. And I lived in DC, not working politically. I went to Georgetown Law School, and I I was an attorney at the Securities and Exchange Commission. But when you live in DC, when you live within the Beltway, you realize it's a different world, and you can literally drive, outside the Beltway on I-95, and you're in a different world when you get out of it. And I think what happened to Joe was, he was I think the fourth in line in seniority in the House, and the three people above him were all in their 80s.
Oh my God.
So I think he was setting himself up to be the next speaker or a next speaker.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, he got too much, in my opinion, he got too deep into this beltway mentality that he didn't pay enough attention to his district and to the people who were actually going to vote for him. I knocked on doors for him. I knocked on doors for him in that last week. Matter of fact, I had knee surgery on a Monday and I was knocking on doors on Thursday, which my doctor wasn't happy about. But um, I I knocked on doors and a lot of people said, I, I haven't seen that guy in 10 years.
Wow.
And that's what happened. And he moved his family to DC. He had moved his family into Virginia, and his kids were going to school in Virginia. And Joe said, I spend a lot of time down here, and I wanted my family to be close to me. But at the same time, AOC hit him in the debate, and when he answered her question about why is your family down there, that's what he said, and she responded, and it was really a slam dunk for her. She said, "You represent this district. Don't you think?" And I'm paraphrasing. She said, "Don't you think that your family should go to our schools? Don't you think that your family should go to our churches, should breathe our air, should drink our water?" And he had no answer for that.
Wow.
So it was a little bit different than Cuomo, but in it's similar in the sense that um, sometimes you think you have it in the bag and you don't work as hard as you should.
See, what I find very interesting about Cuomo, like you said, he thought he had it in the bag. He lost the primary, and he's coming out with so viciously. He's vicious and vindictive, you know?
He's playing Trump. I mean,
It was always like that when he lived around the block from me in the governor's mansion. Everybody said that the work environment was toxic. So he's not exactly a good guy to work for or be with.
well, I will tell you, I spent 2 years, 2013, 2014, as counsel in the New York State Senate.
Hmm.
And there was a couple of times where um, when the governor was not happy at something that my boss had said publicly, and my boss and I were, Senator James Sanders, were called into the executive quarters of the in the Capitol, and it wasn't the governor who did it, but his henchman Joe Percoco, basically, yelled at us and banged his fist on the table. And I said, you can't do that.
Really?
Yes. So it was, that's the way the governor's office was run when he was governor.
Hmm.
And I think that hurt him when he started getting in trouble. One thing you learn in politics is that, and you see it, if if someone if someone rules with an iron fist, if someone rules by fear, if they get into a little bit of trouble, then people start turning on him. If
Right.
and he wasn't a guy that people came out and said, "Oh, Andrew's a good guy and he would never do that." And it was more like, "All right, we could see it."
When he resigned, the leadership, everybody in the uh, Senate and Assembly weren't too thrilled with him. And my wrestler would say the only two people that the only well, the only two people that liked Cuomo was his brother and his dog,
I love that.
you know, because everybody turned on him at that point. So if when everybody turned on him then, and when he decided to run for mayor and he did not win the primary, and people were so afraid of Mondami becoming the next mayor, they were rushing to embrace Cuomo, and I think that's like so so crazy.
Yeah, no, there was it was strange to see some people who were calling for Cuomo's head when he was the governor come out and support him. I mean, Jessica Ramos comes to mind. I mean,
Hmm.
she was brutal when uh, when he got into his trouble. She was brutal calling for his resignation, and then she's running for mayor, and she dropped out and endorsed him.
Really?
Yes, and she was
Wow.
one of the. I think she was one of the loudest in the Capitol to call for his resignation, and
Mm.
um, then she endorsed him for mayor.
Why do you think that that was the case?
Politics.
Okay.
I think it was just politics. I think that, and I haven't spoken to Jessica about this, but I think she, like 4 to 6 weeks out, thought he was going to be the mayor.
Right.
So you might as well make nice, right?
Let's say, of course, we can't change what's going to happen all by ourselves. Let's say Mondami does not win and he goes back into the assembly. How do you think the Speaker Hasty, and all of the his assembly colleagues will be treating him?
You know what? I was up in Albany in February, and I was on the floor of the assembly, and I saw Zoran, and he shook my hand, gave me a hug, and he used his phone, took a selfie with me. Um, you know, I I think I think his colleagues generally like him. He's a smart guy. He's personable. He's very friendly. He's very smart. I think some of his economic policy is a little bit wacky for me, but I think generally he's well liked. I don't think there's going to be a mark against him. I mean, he's not changed. It's not like he ran for mayor and became somebody else. He's always been this Zoran.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like you can say you're a phony or anything like that. He's been this guy.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think it'll change. I don't think it'll change. And you know what? You've got 100 Democratic Assembly members, and it's a big tent. It's a big broad spectrum. So I think I don't think it'll make a difference. I also don't think he's gonna go back to the Assembly.
Well, oh, right. You know, anything is possible in politics, as
Oh, look,
in
he's there. I mean, a month before, I told you, I'm like, I don't think this guy, I don't think anybody could beat Cuomo. And
life. Mm-hmm.
2 weeks later, I'm sitting there, oh, someone could beat Cuomo.
Mm-hmm. So, uh, Mondami has gotten unfavorable press during the last few days over the fact that he couldn't do that weightlifting. Did you see that?
I did see that, and I thought that was ridiculous. Um, you know, I could have done that, but but it's ridiculous that you're wondering what somebody could bench press. How much do you think Franklin Delano Roosevelt could have bench pressed? The guy was in a wheelchair. I mean, it shouldn't make it. It doesn't make a difference.
Mm.
I
But
mean,
the
when
establishment is, grasping straws at this point to say anything that would change people's minds.
well, you just hit the nail on the head. It's the establishment. Um, and a lot of it comes from, places like the Fox News and the New York Post, which, you know, that's their grind always. That's what they do. Um, and so I, I I don't think it's going to stop, but I don't think it's hurting him. I don't think it's hurting him at all.
Really?
I don't no. I don't think I haven't seen anybody in the streets in Queens saying to me, I was going to vote for that Zoran guy, but if he can't bench press, I'm going to have to vote for someone else.
Right, right. I
I
don't,
remember, by the way, it reminded me of a very funny line um, from former Senator Bill Bradley, who, as you know, before he was a senator, was a Hall of Fame championship basketball player on my
right.
on my New York Knicks, and he had run for president in the primary against Al Gore back in 2000, and wasn't really much of a race, and someone asked him a question about reforming the primary process, and he said, how would you like our candidates to be chosen? And he said, jump shots. So,
Oh, funny. Wow. Not too many people know this, but LaGuardia considered himself a socialist.
absolutely, he
Hmm.
was he was a avowed socialist, and at the end of the day, I think a problem that a lot of people have, and it's really, really prevalent on the right. I mean, almost 100% on the right, is that they don't know the definition of capitalism, and they don't know the definition of socialism, and they don't know the definition of communism, but they throw these words around all the time.
Hmm.
And I've had a few times where someone has called me a socialist, and which is funny considering the fact that I'm a international corporate finance attorney, and I spent 2 decades on Wall Street. But suddenly I'm a socialist. If I've helped my over the years, I've helped my clients or employers raise over $30 billion in the capital market. So if I'm a socialist, I'm pretty bad at being a socialist. But
Wow.
but I've asked people when they said that to me, "You're a socialist. What's a socialist?" And just tell me what's a socialist. And they look at you and they have a blank stare because they
Mhm.
can't answer that question. So I mean, if people are listening here, if you get some right-wing maniac start calling you a socialist or a communist, ask him or her what that word means. That I will bet they don't know what it is.
Mhm.
And I think that's where we have a problem. They've become just bad words. Like socialism and communism to these people, um, they they believe that those they're just anybody who is against them is a socialist. Socialism means anything that they're against.
Mhm.
Meanwhile, if you look at what's going on in Washington now, Trump is a socialist. He's took shares in a steel company. He got 10% of a mining company. He got 10% of Intel owned by the government. He's talking about having the government have shares in defense contractors. I mean, that's pure socialism.
Mhm.
It can't get more socialist than the U.S. government taking shares in equity in companies. That's the definition. The definition of socialism is the government owns the factors of production.
Mhm.
And that's when the government's owning mines and the government's owning steel companies and the government owning chip manufacturers. That's that's the government owning, the factors of production.
Mhm. So you would call that socialism?
That is socialism. But you know what? When I taught Introduction to U.S. Politics at SUNY Old Westbury, and we had a class where we talked about capitalism, socialism, communism, and I put a big spectrum on the board. And this is communism, this is socialism, this is capitalism, and there's no countries that are pure socialism, and there's no countries that are pure capitalism. Um,
Hmm.
you know, if you think about it, public schools are socialist. They're government-run schools. The New York City Police Department, NYPD, is socialism. It's a government-run security company. So is the fire department. So is the sanitation department. It's socialism. It's it's every government has a mix of capitalism and socialism, and it's where we fall on that spectrum that we define ourselves. But there's no pure capitalism. Pure capitalism, you wouldn't have public schools. You wouldn't have police, public police force.
So the one of the main issues people talk about is Mondami's stance on grocery stores. And people that are against Mondami say the shelves are going to be empty. What would you say?
Well, I'm not sure about the shelves being empty, but I don't think it's a smart idea that the government is going to enter a very low margin businesses that have, historically been very difficult to run. Um, we're going to have, the New York City government competing against Walmart and Target and um, Stop and Shop and the larger um, grocery stores.
Mm.
It's, you know, we're not gonna be able to compete just on a economies of scale basis. These companies are huge. They buy a lot of merchandise. They've got distribution centers where, 18-wheel trucks deliver to the stores. We can't compete with that. And it's a ridiculous idea that that's how you're going to make things affordable. He's right in the sense that we've got to deal with affordability, but that's not the
Right.
way to do it. We can't compete with these large, supermarket chains and their economies of scale.
But don't forget that Walmart's wages are so inefficient that a lot of the employees have to get food stamps to make ends meet.
Well, that's a different story because, and I've said that for years. Um, that we should be working to, frankly, unionize Walmart, and we should ensure that Walmart is paying its employees enough money that we don't have to subsidize Walmart employees. Walmart is the biggest retailer in the world, and I believe it's the biggest private employer in the United States. And we shouldn't be subsidizing them with they're giving their employees food, and we shouldn't be subsidizing by giving their employees health care. They should be paid enough so they can buy their own food and they can get their own health care.
Mm.
Different story, but I've said that for years. I'm not against Walmart. I want to bring Walmart in the fold. I want Walmarts to be unionized, to pay fair wages, so their employees don't have to be on government assistance.
So if your prediction is correct and Mondami wins the general, will it be smooth sailing for him or will the establishment continue to give him a hard time?
Well, at the end of the day, if he wins, he's the mayor.
Right.
So the establishment isn't going to change that for 4 years. And I don't think that, especially given the power that New York has in Washington, Chuck Schumer's the minority leader in the Senate, and Hakeem Jeffries is the minority leader in the House. I mean, there's a lot of power in New York. I don't think the powers that be are going to want to be fighting with the Democratic mayor of New York City when we've got to fight the crazy right wing in Congress, and we've got to fight this fascist in the White House.
Mhm.
It wouldn't make sense to waste our energy fighting a mayor that's a Democrat.
Right. Now, you and I have known each other for a long time. We
Yes.
go back to the early 2000s. Um, I think politics today, there's so much hatred and divisiveness. How do you change that?
I, I wish I had a definitive answer. Um, what I will say is that is two things. One is I think much of this hate, and frankly, a lot of this hate is based on racism and xenophobia. And I think a lot of that was and has been under the surface for a long time. People would say things in private that they wouldn't say in public.
Okay.
People would, would use and I've been around it. I've heard people, say the N word. I've heard people be homophobic, transphobic.
Mm,
Um, uh, I've seen people, be misogynist, but they did it in private. And to me, the worst thing that Donald Trump has done is allowed it and made it okay in their minds to be openly racist and openly xenophobic and openly homophobic and openly transphobic and openly misogynist. And what I fear is that he's opened this Pandora's box that we won't be able to get this stuff back in.
mhm.
Um, that's my biggest fear. I think that this decisiveness, um, this division, I should say, is is really caused by that. It's really caused by that racist, xenophobic, etc. hatred. Um, you know, I've been around politics for a long, long time, and I remember for years I had Republican friends who, we'd go to the bar and we'd watch a football game and we'd drink beer and eat chicken wings and we'd debate. We would debate foreign policy. We would debate tax rates, what the top tax rate should be. Um, we we debate healthcare policy, and then I saw the change when Trump came around. The same people who I was arguing with about tax rates were now telling me how Mexicans were, you know, rapists and drug dealers, and how blacks were ruining our cities, um, and how that these the LGBTQ community was turning our children gay, and it's like it became not politics anymore.
Mhm.
And I don't do that anymore. You don't see me in a bar with a Republican drinking beer and watching a football game
Mm.
because it's a different world.
Right, it is different.
And that's the problem. I would love to go back to debating foreign policy and tax rates.
Hmm. Now, I had told you before I clicked the record button that I thought of a question to ask the candidates. So, you ready for the question?
I hope so.
If your fairy godmother handed you her wand, her magic wand, and said you can have one wish to make this country better. Change doesn't happen overnight, but if you had that one wish, what would you wish for?
I would wish that the entire population of the country would become empathetic understanding, and tolerant of people who are different than them.
I like that answer. I like that answer. So, Steve, final thoughts about what we've talked about, what you envision with the Mayor Mandami.
You know what?
And wait.
Okay, wait, wait.
We have Adams, we have Sliwa, we have who am I missing?
Cuomo.
Como, of course. Okay. After the general, if they don't win, what do you think is going to happen to these guys? Where will they go?
Well, I think Slee was just going to continue. You know, he's a ringmaster of the circus, and he's going to continue to be the ringmaster, and he'll go on the radio and on TV and continue with the clown show. So I think that's the easy one.
Do you
Um,
think he's smart?
I think he's very smart.
Okay.
I've had a couple of conversations with him. I don't think he'd remember me, but I've had a couple of conversations with him. And I, the thing, the two things that I found about Curtis was one was he was smart, but more importantly, he was intellectually curious. And I remember one time I'm a member of the Knights of Columbus in College Point, and we always sponsor the Memorial Day parade that goes through College Point. And he was there, and he came back to our old building, and I was sitting there talking with him about economics, which I like to talk about economics. And unfortunately, sometimes when I start talking to people, their eyes roll in their back of their heads. But I started talking to him about economics, and he's like, "Wait a minute." And he took out a little notepad and was taking notes.
Mm-hmm.
And I was impressed that he was intellectually curious in that way. At the
Okay.
same time, if you hear him on the radio or see him on the TV, he's an entertainer. So
Okay.
that's where he's going.
Okay. So we have the other two candidates.
Other two, I think, are tougher. Um, One, I'll take Adams first.
Okay.
Okay, I don't think he goes anywhere. I don't. I think this will be the last you've heard of Eric Adams, and the reason I say that isn't necessarily because he's Eric Adams or anything to do with him. The the job of mayor of New York City is the biggest dead end job in the world. No one in the last, I'd say, 100 years has gone anywhere after being mayor of New York. And just think about, in our lifetime, you know, John Lindsay, ran for president and was awful at that. Koch tried to run for governor, and there was nothing there. De Blasio ran for president, and that was a joke. I mean, it's a dead end job. There's nowhere to go.
So why is Cuomo humiliating himself like that?
Well, I don't. I think that he saw this not just as a stepping stone, which I think it is, even though, you know, I believe it's a dead end job, but I think it was rehabilitation.
Well,
If he had won, we would move past the reasons why he had to resign as governor.
but if he had won, fine, but he didn't, then he's still in the arena and he's a laughing stock. Does
He
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 have no pride in himself?
he hasn't helped himself after losing. And the fact that he stayed in the race, and the fact that he's taken on, his old demeanor and tried to be some combination of Andrew Cuomo and Donald Trump, uh, it's not helping himself. And I believe he's 67 years old. I mean,
Right.
there's not a lot of time to, change who you are at that point.
Right.
So, I mean, does he run for something else? Considering the fact that he lost the primary and stayed in the race, you can't count that out. But I think he's probably done also.
Okay. So time will tell.
It will.
So I want everybody listening to this to mark their calendars. August 1st, 2026, the first Saturday in August, is Candidate Recognition Day. So please, please recognize the candidates that have come to knocked on your door or sent you mail. Recognize the efforts that they've put in to make this world a better place. So you've been listening to Steve Behar. I'm Cynthia Pooler. This is Focus on the Candidates. If you like this show, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Um, Thank you, Steve. Thanks everybody for listening. Have a great day. Jeez.